You could see how I think Heidi, in a way, is a proxy for a lot of people broadly on the left. I mean, she's actually a centrist Democrat, but where they say, well, somebody's a Nazi. And then it's like, no, they're not a Nazi. They accuse somebody else of being like the Nazis. Then, then it's like, well, they hang out with the alt-right. Then they do this, then they do that. And there's almost like a series of decision trees where it's like, okay, not a Nazi, but then this, not this, but then that. And so, it's a nice encapsulation, I think, of a thought process that is unfortunately rampant in public discourse right now.
I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me today is the editor-at-large of Reason Magazine and host of the Reason Interview, Nick Gillespie. Finally, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I really appreciate it.
So this is very bizarre for me to admit, but we played a clip of Real Time with Bill Maher last week with Heidi Heitkamp accusing Gina Carano of basically being a Nazi and a white supremacist, and you were sitting next to Heidi Heitkamp when she said this, and I played the clip, and then I said, oh, there's my buddy Nick Gillespie from Reason Magazine, I think I said former guest of the Rubin Report, and then we realized after that we've never done this somehow, and I feel bad. I usually don't apologize at the beginning of a show, but I feel bad that you've never been here before.
In many contexts, I apologize after performance failures. So please don't apologize. I'm happy to be here. I know I've gotten to interview you twice, once for Reason and once at Students for Liberty, LibertyCon. So it's nice to be on the other side of the mic.
All right. One way or another, here we are. It's overdue, but we got a lot to get to. But let's start with that clip, because I want to spend a lot of time obviously talking about libertarianism and if there's any differences between libertarianism and classical liberalism and what should libertarians do now and all that good stuff. But since the clip was what got us here today, let's start with that. So I'm going to throw to it right now.
Who was the woman in the Mandalorian? What did she do? She liked something?
She was a Nazi.
Oh, that's different, right? I'm thinking of somebody else. Well, she's not a Nazi.
She's a white. She's
involved. Look at that. You're calling her in that.
She's called other people Nazis.
Right.
So she's the Nazi.
Okay, everyone's a Nazi now.
Yeah.
She does hang with white supremacists.
It's like a Mel Brooks
does?
movie.
Yeah.
Hangs with white supremacists.
I suppose I'm now subject to defamation.
I don't know. I mean, it depends on what your definition of white supremacist is. That also, the goalpost there changed a lot. Used to be a guy in a Klan hood who.
But I think we have to be really careful. There's two things the Republicans think they're going to get Biden on: cancel culture and this whole Dr. Seuss stuff that's going on, where they're reading Green Eggs and Ham, proving that some of these senators can actually read, and immigration. And so we can't ignore the fact that we got Donald Trump was in part because of political correctness.
Okay, so there's obviously a bunch to unpack there, and it sort of seems to me by your sort of quick reaction, it's like when you're doing this on live TV, sometimes people say something so over the top, you kind of don't know how to react. Can you just lay out what was going through your mind during that?
There were a lot of moments where, I was kind of looking to my left and I was like, this is a former U.S. senator, and I didn't understand where she was coming from. That was certainly part of it. And, the whole, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and Hogan's Heroes and Mel Brooks movies were still, everywhere. And they always were making fun of Nazis. I never thought I would live in America. My father in World War II fought the Nazis. I mean, he was in in Europe fighting as an infantryman. I never thought that people would be seriously lobbying charges of Nazism just as a way of shutting down all sorts of conversation. What I liked in that clip, or what I liked in the reaction there, is that Bill Maher has really stepped up as a massive defender of free speech. And, and I disagree with him about a lot of things. I'm sure you do too. But fundamentally, what you want what you want in anybody in media, certainly, and anybody in any kind of intellectual endeavor to be pushing for free speech. And I was glad to see him push back in a way that, was refreshing and you could see how I think Heidi, in a way, is a proxy for a lot of people broadly on the left. I mean, she's actually a centrist Democrat, but where they say, well, somebody's a Nazi. And then it's like, no, they're not a Nazi. They accuse somebody else of being like the Nazis. then, then it's like, well, they hang out with the alt-right, then they do this, then they do that. And there's almost like a series of decision trees where it's like, okay, not a Nazi, but then this, not this, but then that. And so, it's a nice encapsulation, I think, of a thought process that is unfortunately rampant in public discourse right now.
Yeah, and you could sort of see the way she was laughing and smiling over what she was saying, that she didn't even believe it or even know what she was saying in a way.
I think that second part is probably more to the point. And I have to say, I enjoy talking with her. In some ways, if there were more Democrats like her still in the Senate, I don't think we would be seeing the same level of spending, et cetera. Having said that, I mean, it's a little bit promiscuous to, call somebody a Nazi and then not even know who they are or what they were talking about. And then, just kind of trail off into, well, maybe they're not Nazis, but they hang out with people who hang out with people who hang out with Nazis, who aren't really Nazis. Enough already.
Yeah, it is enough already. Real quick on Bill Maher, because I think you said something interesting there. He is what I would say is maybe one of the last 10 public intellectuals or comedians, whatever you want to call them, that is offering what I would say is a true liberal defense of free speech that obviously you guys like us are completely aligned with.
Right.
But my frustration with him at this point is I want him to just say at this point he's a libertarian, basically. Just say it, Bill. You want to smoke pot. You want to live your life. You're a bachelor at 60, whatever, with millions of dollars and go to the Playboy Mansion or whatever is left with it.
I don't. Is there even a Playboy Mansion left anymore? Playboy Mansion in COVID is.
Somebody bought it, and I don't know what's going on there. But to me, it's like Bill is this odd thing where he'll bring on Adam Schiff and say, all my friends are leaving, and California is not business friendly. But then he'll still support Democrats, and I'm struggling with that. Help me, Nick.
So, back in the 90s, the first time I interviewed Bill Maher, for Reason has been around since 1968. I joined in 1993. I interviewed Bill at some point in the mid-90s, and he was calling himself a libertarian then. He was not particularly ideological. He's not a card-carrying member, I don't think, of anything other than maybe PETA, to be quite honest. But what he meant by that was that he was in favor of free speech. He was against censorship, which is a huge thing. I mean, people forget in the 90s, Janet Reno and Bill Clinton, along with all major Republicans like Bob Dole, if anybody remembers him, they were all talking about censoring cable TV for having too much sex and violence. And when we're talking about like basic cable, and he pushed back on that. He was very big in favor of free speech, in favor of kind of open sexuality, which was kind of forward back then, avant. And then I think with Bush and then Obama and then certainly Trump, he started rolling more with Democrats in terms of economic policy. And so, I actually think, and I'm happy to talk about this more, I think there is a kind of, I consider myself a libertarian without adjectives. I believe in what Reason calls free minds and free markets. I want choice in everything, from abortion to schools to food to, marriage, whatever. But there are people on the right who are more conservative and are libertarian in spirit, or in many policies, people on the left. And I think Bill Maher is pretty good there on the left side of things. And his really important function now is, he is one of the few people in a kind of, major, what's now legacy media. It's funny to think that HBO is actually kind of old school, but who is sticking up for freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And, at one point in that show, he was saying, like, can't we hold two thoughts at the same time? That, for instance, that we were talking about Asian violence against Asians in America. And he was like, yeah, there could be some of that coming out of COVID, but it's also that the Atlanta shooting was not that. And I like to hear that kind of stuff, from whether it's from the right or the left, like people who are just saying, let's have a conversation that is not simply talking points or slurs like Heidi Heitkamp was tossing around.
So it sounds to me like you'd kind of love him to say he was a libertarian in a way, because it would be great for libertarianism. But on another hand, he serves a sort of function as a remaining liberal, let's say.
I think so, yeah. And I again, like right-left libertarians, like sometimes you hear conservatarians and left libertarians and whatever. I'm less interested in that and the slogans or the labels, and I'm more interested in like when you see people actually having conversations. And one of the great virtues of his show, I think Real Time, and before that Politically Incorrect when it was on ABC and before that on Comedy Central, was that it was a staging ground for people who disagree with each other getting to air their, to have a conversation or even an argument for more than 30 seconds at a time. One of the things that I think you've done and a host of other people is really take advantage of the space and time that YouTube and other platforms, the Blaze actually is also a fascinating network to me because it's, the one thing you can't say about the Blaze is that, they're only talking in 15-second sound bites, like CNN, MSNBC, or Fox even, these are long shows that are taking advantage of the time and space we have. So more power to Bill Maher for that.
Yeah, all right. So let's move off Bill Maher for a moment. Yep. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep nudging him on my show. That's my plan, is just to keep nudging him, because it's like the Democrats, when they come to cancel him, I said this to him once, when they, at an after party at Real Time, I said, when they come to get you one day, it's going to be the left, not the right.
Yeah, I think he knows that, because I think it was during the show, like a portion that aired, because of COVID, there were, fewer guests and no after party or anything like that. But he was saying, that like when he goes places, like people are often afraid to speak up, even in private gatherings, because if you don't know everybody, I mean, it's kind of like everybody's in the mafia, and they're always figuring there's a couple of, federal agents who are recording everything, so you don't say anything if you don't know everybody. What if fucked up world to be living in, like where we have, sometime, since the early 60s, we kicked free of all the dumbest restraints on free speech. Government censorship. You couldn't legally publish Lady Chatterley's Lover, James Joyce's Ulysses, Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer, Allen Ginsberg's Howl before about 1960 without worrying about being dragged into court. We got rid of all of that, and then we created the internet, which is like an infinite, hard drive where you can just load up everything you want. And we're arguing now about policing each other's speech in such picayune, horrible ways. It's tragic.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.